Welcome everybody to our 126th webinar of our series that we started back in March of 2020. We've been doing these for quite a while and having a good time doing these. And one of the things that we do quite a bit is we'll tackle a specific subject, and then other times we're tackling something that maybe is just a little bit of a bigger topic, and that's what this one is today. We're going to talk. Not just an update like we normally do with our friend Emiliano from AIM Italy, where we talk about Ray Studio 3 analysis and give an official update, usually timed around an update in the beta software. But our co-host today, Matt Romanowski, has been a big help to us, and has been really leading the effort in testing and trying some different things and finding some of these bugs along with a lot of the rest of you, and we appreciate you continuing to do that. But with Matt doing that, he mentioned to me a few weeks ago that says that maybe we do one of these where we talk about some of the, not a big release, but the user interface is continuously getting small updates, and they fix a little thing here, they add a right click function there, or things like that. And Matt thought, we should really just jump in, do a quick discussion about the difference between Ray Studio and Ray Studio 3 to kind of get everybody on the same page, and then dive in and look at some of these different areas where maybe there's been some slight adjustments, and you, like me, you get in there and pretty soon you just know your buttons that you use to do what you need to do, and maybe you're not searching around a little bit. And Matt's done a little bit of that, so he's going to talk his way through that. So we'll have a good time with that. Here's a little bit about Matt. Again, we really thank Matt. 14th time he's co-hosted with us here, so we've monopolized his time pretty heavily at but we enjoy having him here. So Matt is a leading technical and stocking AIM dealer, and he's got the yellow 914 that he races, that we've all seen data from. Lots of data out there that we have attached in links to a lot of the previous webinars that we've done that allow you to grab some of the data if you don't have some of your own and you're trying to learn Ray Studio 3. Matt's got video and data out there that he's shared with us. So all out there ready for you to play with that. Yeah, cue the 914 jokes, as they say. So but all good. Matt, thanks for coming. I appreciate you doing this again with us.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here, and hopefully it goes better than when I started taking all my screenshots. I started putting the presentation together, and then I was numbering everything, and I got to like 40 something, and I'm like, oh man, this could be interesting.
But maybe we need a different plan of attack. No. So that's what we did, right? We adjusted.
Right.
So, yeah, it's all good. Perfect. So a little bit about what we're going to do here today is just jumping in and talking about the layout, and then and I think 3 or 4 of the slides we're just going to kind of wing it together. Matt's going to kind of do the talking, and when we get ready, we'll unshare my screen and we'll jump over to Matt's, and we'll walk through some live data. So it'll be kind of fun. If you have any questions, make sure that you add them into the question and answer box. We're open to that as well, and there's going to be a lot of links. Possibly, if Matt mentions something, we may have a link into our chat box for the folks that are here live. If you're watching this later on YouTube, all of the exact same information, the links plus a bunch of more links, will be down in the description box ready for you. So just click on the show all on the description box, and you'll have a complete list of everything that we may talk about here today on the live side. So appreciate it. Matt, go ahead and give us a little bit of a start here with the database layout where Ray Studio 3 typically opens.
Yeah, I wanted to give people an idea. So when you click on the Ray Studio 3 button, you come to the screen, and if you don't have a lot of data, the database side isn't as full, but it's broken down into 3 spots, and this is a little bit different than Ray Studio 2, so I think it throws people off sometimes. On the left, you have your database, and that's the biggest category of items we have. And what Ray Studio 3 does for you is it groups everything into events. So if you have a weekend where maybe it's a 3-day weekend, you run 3 events or 3 days in a row, it puts those all together, which is a really nice feature, because when you want to go back and look at the data, these things are grouped, so you know those days go together. And then the next smaller segment of this is the sessions. And then we get to break that weekend down and we have all our sessions, just like we used to have. That part's really similar. And then the next way that we break it down is a summary of that session that we're looking at. And then it breaks it down into laps and everything else. And we'll dive deeper into it. But when you understand this kind of global view of how things start, I think it makes starting to get into the data a little bit easier, and it helps you in how Race Studio 3 goes. And one of the things I should have said as we get going here for anyone watching live is post up your questions as we go through. Because if I don't explain something in a way that makes sense to you, let's cover that so you can really dive into Race Studio 3 as we get going and we start to near the full production release. So if we hop to the next slide, one of the questions that people ask me kind of all the time is, I always think of what's different in Race Studio 3. And somebody said, well, what's the same? And this is a discussion Roger and I have had a lot of times, is that Race Studio 3, while it's really different, there's a lot of it that carries over and it's really the same. So I put this red block over everything that you can see is the same. And on the very left, we still have our measures list. We still have our laps list if you click the laps button, and our graphing and the story, like the storyboard and the graphing, the maps, those kind of things are all the same, no matter which version of Race Studio analysis we're looking at, 2 or 3. And the controls for those that are above to the right of the graph for zooming and for how we display those graphs and the delta function are really the same. So if you're comfortable using those in Race Studio 2, they transfer over really well. And I think once you start to think of it that way, of what's the same, it starts to help you out a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
And then if we jump to the next one, we'll see what's different. And when we look at it this way, there's not a lot that's that different. And as we start to get into these things, what's really great about how Race Studio 3 changes things is it makes the changes that we want to do all the time really easy. So in a lot of these blocks with the graphs that we see highlighted in the red, those are almost, I think of them as user convenience buttons, that when we want to change something, we can click a button and change it, which is a stark contrast to how Race Studio 2 was written, that was really menu driven. And you had to dig into these menus and you had to know where to click and what menu to pull and everything. Now there's just a button for us. And I think it makes a big user difference in how all of this goes. So now if we want to, if we kind of remember those general ideas, if we jump into some data, I think we'll be able to see this really in how it goes and how all this works together.
So I will stop sharing mine, Matt, and you should just
All
be
right.
able to click your share.
Bring mine here.
Everybody out there, while Matt's doing that, if you need to, there are some controls when you actually get, when it pops up here in a second and Matt is showing his screen.
All right.
You should be able to, in the across the top, there's some view options. You can make Matt and I go away. You can have it full size. There's some options for you as you're watching this live if you choose to.
So now we're in my regular release of Race Studio 3, or my Race Studio 3 beta, and I'm looking at analysis. So I clicked my Race Studio 3 analysis button here. And we get in, and just like we talked about, we have our summary, we have our sessions, and we have our, we have our database, our sessions, and our summary data. One of the things that I wanted to point out, that kind of in the biggest set of things, is this gear right here. When we click it in the database section, this is where we get to import items, and Emiliano covered that, I think, in one of the very first webinars, and Robbie can drop a link for that one. We can change the database filters, which we're going to do here in a second, and the cleanup compressed database button is one of the ones I don't think we've need to use yet, and we haven't really had too much direction on it. Another really, I think, functional part of the database that is in here that's really easy to use now is this idea of recent sessions. So we can look at the last 30 recorded, the last 30 analyzed, the last 30 imported. So if we just imported something, here we go, here's that data set. And if we analyzed it, here's the data we were in. And if we recorded it, here's our data. We can create smart selections, so we can do it based on a person. So we always pull up a person's data and we can create manual selections that we go in and we define it even more. These buttons, I think, are really powerful. And when you're at the track, they make working with everything so much easier.
A ton of power over there that is underutilized so far, but it's people just don't know it's there quite yet, and they just sort from the top down because it always puts it the newest one at the top. But
Right.
Eventually you're going to want to go back and look at a year ago's qualifying, and boy, those different filter boxes down there are going to be very, very helpful.
Yeah, and it's one, Roger, I learned it from you, was in Race Studio 2, you would import something, and if the dates were wrong, it would put it somewhere in the middle of the list.
Yeah.
And we used to try to sort it by import number. Well, now we can go to these recent sessions tab and just pull it up right away. Pekka asks how to organize sessions that have the oldest day on top when having multiple days. Oh, perfect. You led me right into our session view.
I was actually reading it, and I'm going, I know Matt wants to go there next. Let's try it.
Let's pick one. I'm just trying to find one here that we get a lot of stuff, but let's go. Here we go. We got a session that has a database day, right? An event weekend, and it's got all these sessions in it. So if we want to change that, we can click on the date at the top and it'll move it through for us. So a pretty powerful way to get through this.
Again, fairly similar to Race Studio 2, if you're going that direction again.
Yep. And we're going to see a little bit more of a powerful way to do that in a minute. Is one of the things we can start is we see these gear icons all over the software. And these are really where we can jump in to set our settings. And one of the things that changed since the previous webinars and was covered is the gear in the sessions area is now where we go to do our profiles. So when we get in here, this is where we can export, clear, or share a profile. And that changed a lot. So all the previous webinars that we did when we talked about profiles in Race Studio 3, I know Roger and I had done one on that. Maybe the guys can throw the link in for you. When you download that and you want to import them, this is where you need to go, is in this gear button versus where it was buried into the sessions before. So kind of note that, because as you start to move and share these profiles between people, it's a good way to, it's where you need to go, and an important thing to remember with it. Our next button here is how we show the screen and how we lay it out. Our database is always on the left, but we can, we can have it as the list. We can have it as the agenda view. So this isn't I was on to the next one. The agenda view is super powerful because it shows us who was on track at the same time. And as we talked about in the session I did with Bjorn in the Patroon chapter BMW, this lets you see who is on the track. And when you pull up the data, you can put everybody on track and see their position and their inputs in comparison to each other. So it's a really neat way to leverage some of the power of the data.
Especially for teams when you might have 2 or 3 cars out there and you want to compare the data. This is an easy way to find the right session very, very quickly.
Yeah, this is a great session. This is, in Trans Am 2, these are all the guys that drive under Mike Cokespanner. And these are all those cars and when they're on track. And you can go through and see the event and the session and who was out there.
Very cool.
A great way. My favorite way, the way I usually use it, is this list view.
Yeah, me too.
The next one that we come to is where we put the preview and the summary data. I like it, our first option, where it's top and bottom. Is kind of the way I think. Although when I started to look and I said left to right, this one is, if you're a linear thinker, this might be a very good one for you, because we have our biggest category of the database, we have our sessions, and then we have the summary data. So it flows from biggest category down to the smallest category, and it's a nice way to see that. I think it's something that one of them is going to speak to you. And if you really don't like change, you also have this option. It's a new button that I found as I was putting this all together, that we can hide that preview, and we can have the big list of all of our sessions, which is pretty nice to do. And then to go back to the question before is then we can separate these and have all the drivers, all the sessions laid out for us. I personally, as soon as I saw the option to have these previews, this is always on. I love having this because it gives you that little bit more information really fast without having to click anything.
I think there's a little bit of a change in our processes that we may go through, where then this becomes even more and more important to us, or more and more used by users as they start to say, I just really want to look at my temperatures or whatever. We set that down at the bottom, or oil pressures or speeds is what the default is. But we'll begin to use these preview things, I think, a lot more. It's got the basic little channel report on the left and
Yep,
the basic strip, the measures graph on the right. I think will get used more and more.
absolutely. And I think as people learn to use it and see some of the power in there, it's really going to leverage it for them. The rest of our buttons, we're going to cover these ones pretty quick. Is we have, if we have a session, we can click the file, it opens them. We can click the next one to change the properties, and we'll see another spot we can look at those. You can export the session. So if somebody wants you to email it, or you want to put it on a USB drive to share with someone, you select your session, you click the export, that's where it goes. This is your danger button. It's the erase the selected one. You get a warning before it actually erases it, but once it's gone, there is no undo. So an important button to use with caution. You can upload the session to AIM if you have a problem with it, or if you want to share something. This is a great way to really give your feedback and with it, and it lets you fill out a little form. The math channels, those are going to get covered in a future session. And then this track map button digs into all the track maps, and that's the session that Emiliano covered in his last session. And Robbie and the guys can throw a link up to that, because he did a great job of talking about the track maps and how we can use all those there. And that was covered a little bit in the session with the Patroon chapter, because they had some really neat maps that they did with it. When we jump down to the summary area, this is where the power of Ray Studio 3 really starts to show before we get into any more information.
Yeah, you haven't even opened a test yet, right? All you've done is download it.
So when we look at this, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, we'll give it a little more significance as we're studying it here. We have a channel report that's open that we can set the channels in here. And then we have a graph, like a time distance, a strip chart, and we can pick what's in these axes. So anytime we see a gear like this, it's a setting, no matter where it is, and we can choose what we want. So across the bottom, we have our lap number, and then this one's showing lap time. But we can pick anything in our data. So we could pick, say, max RPM and put that across our session. We can pick, minimum voltage and see that. So really quick, we can do some of the checks that we do in the data right there. And it goes as we click a different session, it puts it all in here. So really fast, we can do some of our summary data checks before we even open the file. And I think that is a really great opportunity to change maybe your process of doing things, and to look at these items before you even open it. And you don't have to dig in. You can see right away that this was okay.
As you're thinking about that, Matt, I'll give you a quick little break. Kyle asked a question about those buttons across the top, and of course, once we open a session, you have the math channels button and you have the track map button, right? The difference between them here before you open a session and inside when you are actually working a session is it's like the old side of Ray Studio 2. You used to have a general tab, and the actual in the math channel side, you used to have a general tab and a session math channels. And here you can open up the math channels button, and you're going to get all your general math channels, right? Nothing that's directly attached to a certain session. Same thing here, and same with the track maps. You get in there, you can you check out all the tracks. You can build a new one right there if you want to. You can pick it and then be off and running, right? So more general here in that bar that's up across the top versus when you're actually in a session and you're actually pushing what looks like the same buttons, but then you're working session specific.
Yeah. In here, the other option that I think is really powerful when we start to look at the summary data, and it caught me off guard until Roger showed me about it, is this graph, this bar here. And this lets us, we can move these points to give our range of laps that we want to pick. So right now, as we move it in, we're only going to look at from the fastest lap, a 30.8, to the highest is 32.7. And it automatically selects those laps in our data. So now instead of looking at this summary of everything, we can look at it for a range. We can throw out those laps that maybe were caught in traffic, maybe something held us up, and really hone in on the specific laps we want.
Again, you're doing such a quick preview, and you've got a way to filter out the laps very, very quickly. And that bar is everywhere in preview, but it's not necessarily in Race Studio 3 analysis internally. But I have been pushing the software team really hard to use that in especially split reports where you want to filter some stuff out. So I think that bar is you're going to start to see that in other parts of the software as well.
Yeah, and there's another neat button that gets us there when we look there. The bar becomes more powerful, I think, in this screen, which is our second button that gives us a time distance. And here it's set to speed. And what I think is so kind of cool with this is it's something that we've talked about in some of the previous webinars, is that it shades all of our data for the range. So very quickly, we can see the range of speeds that we had across all our laps. And as we go over a lap, it shows us where that line is. But as we change our bar and hone in on the really good laps, we see the range shrinks. So we can throw out the outliers. Like we don't have to turn on 10 laps. We don't have to do all these different things. It does it for us, and we can see where the laps are selected.
And gives you that quick visual area of where do I need to go to work. Even if you never even open the test, you know that braking at turn 1 is the area that had the most noise in the graphs. Pretty cool.
Right. And we can change this measure. So if there's something else you want to hone in on, you can get to it right away.
Yeah,
really
Kyle mentions that it's really good for vehicle health stuff, having that set up that way there, where it's your oil pressure, your water temperature, whatever happens.
Oh yeah. If we just pull up voltage instead of speed, we see it all right here, right?
It auto scales, so but if it all of a sudden scales from 14 to 12 and you see a couple laps that are down, something is done wrong.
Right. And something I didn't highlight in other spots, we have this great search bar. Everywhere we go, we get to use it. And it might be one of my favorite things in Race Studio 3.
I agree.
I went from never using search bars to using this thing all the time.
Yep. And it's everywhere in the software.
Right. Our next button in here is the video button. So very quickly, we can pull up the synchronized data and video. And again, we can change what measures we're looking at. We can play the video. I'm going to save you all the fantastic noise from my 914. But as we go through, it keeps everything synced and we can see it all.
And again, you have not even opened this session yet.
Right. We're just looking at the preview.
Yep.
We get to pull up the track map, which is a great way just to look at it. We can zoom. We can see the variance in all the sessions and all the lines in that lap. Pretty neat little feature. And again, we're not even in the session, right? We can just click on a session, pull it up, and look and say, how regularly was he here? A funny one, it always catches me off guard when there's cars on the track. Every time I do it, it's
or a wall across the track right there.
Right. But you can see all the variance there. So I think it's a really quick way to look at these things. You can change what we laid on top of, whether it's Google or one of the other ones. I find for me, Google works pretty well. We can use the zoom buttons. If we get just way off base, we can use the locator button. It brings us right back. So we can zoom back in, and you can do it with your scroll wheel. You can pinch on your mouse button, really great current functions and everything. Our next button is our weather. As we look into the weather, one of the things that's a little peculiar about it is when we look at it, sometimes you'll see these different values because it has to pull them down from the server. So you have to double click on it. It gets the data, and then you click copy it over, and then it fixes it. So you can see the data from your session as we're going along and what it was that day. So there's no more, why was this lap time way off? Oh, it was cold, it was wet, you have it right here. It tells you what the day was. It's 53, it's pretty humid, and a little bit windy, right? A really great way to pull all this together. And down on the bottom is it tells you, early in the morning, there was light rain and everything. So you go, oh, it was probably a green track day, right? It rained on the overnight and then it cleared up. This last button is, we're going to tie in Keith's question here about the location of everything. So this one's the properties, and it's just like the properties up here. We can't edit in this part, but we get to see all of it. So we can see it was New Hampshire, it was a test, it was me driving, it was the Chiquita car. These are the file names. These buttons will bring you, it'll copy it to a folder for export, or it'll open in Windows Explorer where you are. And then it gives you this great data on the session. So you can see the total distance in the session, the time, and then all the information about the logger setup in the car. So a powerful way to get everything. And Keith's question there about, can you put things on an external drive? Absolutely. But you always have to have it plugged in, because the database is always going to look for this path. And that is critical to finding the data. So if you plug it in and that external drive changes from
E drive or something,
B to E,
yeah,
it's not going to find it. So you can do it. It's probably a computer answer that's kind of something that I don't really know about, but you can certainly do all that. But just make sure that's always the same. Otherwise, it's going to break the link and it won't work right. Kyle made a comment about the needing internet for the weather to work. You need it for the first time. I believe after that, it stores this information with the data file. So it's always there.
That's true.
So you don't need it forever.
You have to go to the server only one time. And then if you go check that a year from now, it will, whatever you had placed in there will be attached to those sessions.
Right. So this is the big picture of how the main interface starts. And then from here, we can open up a session. So I'm just going to open this session, and I'm a double click guy, so I double click on them. And a neat thing about Ray Studio 3 is it's going to open stuff up to the last profile and the last set of items that you have going on. So I've got one here with a whole bunch. I'm going to close them and get us back to kind of where we're going to start, is time distance plot. And if you want some profiles to start, you can download them from the previous sessions to give you somewhere to kind of start to know how to look at them. And we have some really basic ones. We have some more advanced ones. Roger had a really great one with some great layouts in it and how to look at everything. But here's a pretty simple one. And this is our first button. And actually we should start, our most left button is change the profile settings. And this is a button you're going to be in a fair amount, because you can change your colors in here. So when we click that button, I'm going to do it again for you. We click the gear, then we say options. And this is where you can have the argument with friends about, is the light mode better than the dark mode? A battle Roger and I have all the time. And I have some with the other users. I usually like the light mode. Every once in a while I like the dark mode. And then you can get in here, change all your colors. And this is one that you're not going to notice it necessarily right now, but when you want something and you can't find it, remember that all the way down the bottom of this, the number of allowed reference slices, when you start to look at all your laps and you want 4 movies, not 2, this is where you get to go to set it. So an important thing to remember, that that extra 1 is all the way down the bottom. In this option set, we also get to save our profiles and do a save as and load them. So all these profiles that you make up, you can then go in here and pick them to load them and change them. And we get to copy from profiles to go. And this copy is actually a newer button that I'm not positive what all of it, of how it copies the profile to get going. So I'm not going to click that one on you today. I'll report back my next session for that one. So in our time distance is, we have our gear. And then this is where it starts to get a lot about our previous, it looks much like Ray Studio 2, but we have a better layout that we can put more items in here. And we're going to come back and dig into these a little bit in each component. But I want to show you the next view that we can have is the movie layout. And again, we get data and it adds this movie window for us. And I think the normal view, when you pull it up, is going to be just the measures graph in your video. A very simple way to look at your data. It's all linked together. So when we have a data point, we have the movie view with it. This is something people ask for a long time. It's very powerful with drivers because you can see this point on the track this is the point when I started a brake. You can see this is my slowest point in the corner. You can pull all those things together. It's a really powerful way to use your data. Our next button that we come to is the track layout, which is the map. As we talked about in the maps before, we have our buttons up here that we can use to zoom out and to zoom in and see this whole session. And if we want to turn it off the Google view, we can go here and really see it all. So a powerful way to look at the track view. This is something that speaks to a lot of drivers because I found as I used it, this line that it shows for you is very accurate. And Roger's our resident kind of Google and mapping and surveying expert, but my experience, Roger, has been really accurate. Have you kind of seen the same thing?
I have, and getting better all the time. And it's a function of us with better GPS qualities, right? And Google, the background imagery, or Bing, or whichever one you use, they're getting better all the time with their accuracy of their background images. People would always think it was the GPS, immediately blame the tool, the GPS positioning, where often it was the imagery in the background that was shifted. So, but getting better and better all the time. I agree.
Yeah. So a great way to show a driver or yourself right where you are, in a nice feature. We can see, here that's pretty accurate, right? You get right down to that curve.
Yeah, and you're looking at just one segment right now, which is kind of an interesting view. When you come back out, just sector 8 is what's actually highlighted right now, and then we can change that.
Right. The next button that we have here is our scatter plot. One of the ones I really, really, really like in Race Studio 3, because we can colorize them. And this ability to add these colors is so powerful in how we get to look at our data and put some context to it. And I'll show you how to put that all in here after. The only thing I ever notice, I always think of scatter plots as XYs, but scatter, XY, same thing, different names, great way to pull it up. Next one is our histogram view. Great. I find histograms, I don't use them for a little bit, and then all of a sudden I jump in because I find something that I want to be able to look at. So maybe it's what gears you use the most at a track. Maybe it's what speeds you go the most. A great way to start digging into things and get a different view and a different perspective. Split times reports. This is worth its own session. It's so powerful now. We get the graphing on the side. It links the segment as we pick a segment. It links it to what we display. It highlights the lap. We can add extra measures in here. It's really incredible. And as you start to want to do your deep dive, you can get so deep down in here and look at all these little tiny differences of how one measure changed another one. So maybe it was which sector was your fastest and what that distance came out to. So you can see the shortest distance here. If we're looking at the 4th segment on the 6th lap, and we look at wasn't actually the shortest distance, right? And it wasn't even the fastest time.
Yeah, did you take the inside of the big corner, or did you let it float up a little bit and be able to make better decisions real quickly? Very handy.
Right. And we can zoom in on our map, right? We can get car positions great. And I think something that really changed how I use Race Studio 3 that's important in this interface part of it is as we're looking at all this, we can go back to these other layouts. So if we have a scatter plot, we can look at a segment that has the braking. We can drill down in one of these segments to where we want. And then we can hop over to the scatter plot and see it on a friction circle. So we can pull all these things together and really find new ways to look at our data and really quick, right? We can do all this quick because we have the extra buttons, we have the extra summary data in the beginning to do all this. After our split reports, and I think this one's really worthy of its own session, split reports, we can jump into our channel reports. And this one's not populated. We can add all of our items. So if we want to add, again, we have the search bar, right? So if we put GPS speed, we can type in GPS. And if we want to be even more, we can put speed. Here we go. We can add our min, our max, our average. And then we have all these other measures, just like we had in Race Studio 2. Our variance, the average if it's not 0. we say, okay, so here it is. Our minimum speed was 37. Our max was 105. Obviously, guys, there's a multiplier in here times 10. The Race Studio 3 doesn't read over 1,000, so I have to divide by 10. It's a CAN thing. Robbie did a great session. He can probably link to how those multipliers work in the CAN setup. And then we have our average speed. Average speed's a pretty fun one. I don't use it all the time, but you always hear the stories about, I think it's Bud and Willow in North America is supposed to have the highest average lap speed. But you can get in here and like, you can calculate yours really quick. And it's a good kind of measure of overall performance directly linked to lap time, but a nice way to pull all this together.
While you're getting ready for the next one, BNR asked a question in the chat, but I thought it would be great. Can video be pulled onto these screens? Any function we have can be added to literally every screen, right? So you, the answer to that is yes. I mean, all you got to do is right click. Matt's going to talk about some right click stuff here in just a moment. You'd right click, you'd add a window where you want it and put the video. And then save it as a profile.
Out of order what I thought, but I mean, such a great question. Anywhere we click, we can add windows. So if we right click, we can say add a window to the bottom, to the right, whatever area we want. And then we can choose this window. You can say movies and boom.
Boom. Now where you
so
click,
here's our segment, it pulls us right there.
There you go. At this point, if you liked it, you would just save it as a profile, resave it and save it and store it. If you hit save profile, it just saves any changes you've made. If you like it as a whole nother one, save profile as, and you now have it for the future. It's very, very powerful.
Right. And you can see that's why when we look at my load profile, the profiles in Race Studio 3 and the simplicity or the complexity of these profiles and what you want can be anything you want. It can be from a really simple one to a super complex. What I love about this is I just keep saving them. Yeah. And then you can save it. You can have all these things in one, and you can bring elements from one type to another type. So just because it's a split time doesn't mean that we can't add, it's going to show really poorly here, but we can add a time distance. And we don't have a measure selected on it, but we can add all these items. So as we do that, we can really hone in on the information that is important to us. We can add a storyboard here, but I think we got it too small.
While you're tinkering with it, there you got it. I got the storyboard.
Right.
Stephen Torrey asks, is there a place where we can download pre-made profiles? If you go back to any of our Race Studio 3 videos, webinars, or we even do one, just do a search for profiles, preferred profiles, or we did a whole one on nothing but several of us showing those. Every one of those, we have put a link in those description boxes where those can be downloaded and imported into your Race Studio 3 if you like them. And Emiliano mentioned to me the other day that they're about to do their process where they're going to actually add some pre-made profiles in. Sample profiles will be coming with the software shortly. Right now, there aren't any built for you when you first open it up, but there will be soon.
Great. And to Kyle's point about having 2 times the tabs, that's coming too. I know that's in the process and the list of things that's getting added in.
AIM did take note.
As they might have taken a note a long time ago in the bazillion emails I send them.
And Matt, John is asking that question. Don't need to do it yet, but keep in mind, how do we change the order of channels? It's it's a brand new function, and it's probably in your idea to look at a little bit later.
Right. And then I'm not going to jump into these last 2 buttons that we have here for math channels and the tracks, because we covered them in the other webinars, and really they're ones that are pretty involved, and they can be their own session.
And the math channel one, they're finalizing some stuff, and there will be an upcoming, probably in the next month or so, specific math channel function for Race Studio 3 analysis.
Yep. So if we now, because we've been around a little bit, so we started out looking at the overall. When we start looking at Race Studio 3, we saw the database, the sessions, the summary, and then we jumped through. We looked at all the different layouts that they give us to look at our data. And we can bring elements of each one of these and put them together. So if you open up your software and you use one of the pre-made layouts, one of the ones that we're using, we can go through this and say, well, now what are the options we have inside here and in each one of these? And this is one of the spots where in Race Studio 2, things were really broken down to, you had to know what menu to go to. Race Studio 3 is really button driven, and they add what I think are just superb ways to interact with the software and get what you want out of it. So a little bit of an aside, one of the things that still works is if we double click on a scale, it auto scales it for us. Really easy way just to make things and maximize them and look at what we want. We can still grab our bar in between two graphs to move it and separate how we want those things. We can do it between the different windows that we have. So these functionalities are what you would, I think, expect from any current software, and how you would interact with it and make it what you want. And then you save these profiles. The buttons that I use, I didn't think I'd use them as much as I do, but I really enjoy them, is these line size buttons. So very quickly, instead of having to dig through a menu, we can click this button right here and pick our size. So we can turn the line off to 0.0, and we can go all the way to 9. This is a personal preference. For me, the size 1 on my screen that I usually use is kind of too small. So I really like using 2, but depending on your eyes and the data and what you're looking at, one of these is going to be good for you.
And it saves in the profile. Once you set it, it's saved in your profile. So
yeah, and it saves it there forever when you pull up your profile. It's the same thing with the dots. We can change the size of these dots, and it will change. One of the things I'm doing on my mouse is you can use the scroll wheel, you can use the zoom wheel, or you can use the zoom button to really jump into this data to zoom in, and you can see as we go, we get more and more dots.
Yeah, sample rate.
Right, and this sample rate, this data is from a GPS-09, so it's at 25 hertz. There's a ton of great data in here, and you can see all those points. A really neat way if you kind of want to see the data, a deeper topic when people want to know about the interpolation between the points. It's really small time frames in here, but you can dig in and see right where it took your measurement. A great way to dive into that. I usually leave the dot set to default and kind of my lines to 2. The exception to that one is in the maps, I like to have a bigger line so it stands out for me more. And you can pull up this and make it bigger based on what size map you like, or what size line. The downside to it is, you start zooming in, and sometimes that line becomes too big to get the data and the information you want out of it. So you can hop right back in here and change it. Those size buttons are in almost all your windows that have a line. So a really quick and easy way to jump through those. One of my favorite options to look at things. My next favorite button, maybe a button I like more, is this laps button. This thing is so cool that we can pick all our laps. We can pick our best lap, our best 3, or our best 5. So while we don't have the toolbar that we looked at in our summary, when we're in our data, we have our laps buttons. So we can pick our 3 best laps. And if you're a really great driver and you have 5 laps that are still really close in lap time, you can hop in here and pick your best 5. So really great ways to hop in your data and to quickly drill into the ones that you want.
Emiliano mentioned that that laps button, that they've adjusted that a little bit the last time he did it, and what they did is they tried to use what do most people want to do. Certainly your fastest lap, your 1 lap, all laps, and then 3 and 5 he finds is pretty typical of people wanting to when they're comparing. So that's what they added. If gosh, if you think there's something else, let us know, and we'll think that through, and maybe we add another option. But that I agree with Matt. That is a very, very quick and easy way of doing it.
Yeah, and when we dig into these spots, it's so nice to be able to pick all your laps really quick, right? And then you get this big, dense block of dots in your friction circle, but just as quickly, you can go back to just your best lap or your best 5 or 3 or whatever you're honing in on. So I think this also is a great opportunity. I was looking at some data with somebody yesterday, and they pulled up their best lap really quick. And I said, well, we want to know the trend, right? So now, super fast, this is sort of our trend button, right? Are you consistent? Pull it up, your best 3. This removes a little bit of the, oh, there was traffic, I wasn't as normal. Oh, there was this or that.
While you're there, Matt, this is a perfect time to talk about that button that you mentioned earlier. Right now, you just brought up 3 laps, but we're only seeing the GPS longitudinal, GPS speeds, the channel tags from only 2 channels. And this is the biggest question I get of people when they're transitioning to Race Studio 3. Why is it only showing 3 speeds at the cursor location if we've got 3 laps open? Right. And that's where you go back to the cogged wheel over there and you hit the options and it's showing only show 2 chunks of data, right? Reference slices. Put it up to 4 and then click on OK. And now you'll have the
right.
It didn't take for whatever. I don't understand that fully. Maybe it's a size thing, but it should have shown the 3 of them. But there's yeah, interesting. Maybe we found a little problem. Oh, you got to turn it on. You got to turn it on over on the little eyeball over on the right, on the
right
over there. If you go back to there, yeah, there you go. You got to turn it on and tell it you want to see it.
Yep, that's
what it was. I think that ought to be automatic, but we'll work on that. But there's why you see that sometimes. I thought that would be a great way to tie that together.
Yeah, it really is, and it ties 2 other things together. I think is that something I didn't think to put in here, but that you brought up that was really good is these eyeballs. Is we can turn off the information from the laps and we can pick our reference lap.
There you go.
So when we have this on, you'll see your time compare changes. So a good way to be able to pick which one becomes the reference.
Yep.
And sometimes it catches me off because if you pick your slowest lap, you see your time compare go the wrong way. And more than once I've looked at this and went, I found a bug, and it's me not using it right.
That's just an addition to Race Studio 2 always did it. Fastest lap was always your reference. And a lot of people wanted to say, no, I want this driver's lap to be the reference lap, or my, lap 12 to be my reference lap. And we didn't have that option before. So now we do.
Yes. And the other thing I think this ties in is when we go back to our all sessions button, if you find a bug like that, you can upload the file to AIM and put the description in of what you found.
Perfect. It is beta software, by the way. So please do that.
Right. And the guys are dedicated. They're working on it all the time, but it takes everybody's input to find these bugs because there's so many use cases and so many differences in it that it just takes sometimes somebody doing something that's peculiar to do that. Todd asked about the color for the best 3 laps. That's in your profile. So as you set these colors, it'll have it in there. So if you change these to whatever you want, it's when Roger and I talk about data a bunch, he gets more particular about colors. I'm just like, well, they're different. So to me, this gray would bug me. So I'd click it and make it yellow or something, but 3 different colors.
Again, but it's all totally user definable, right? And once you get it set the way you like to, you jump up and you hit the little cogged wheel and save the profile. And then next time you open up 3 of them, those will be the 3 colors.
Yeah. And obviously this is the right set because it's German colors for German cars.
There you got that going for you. Now, if you only had a dark background, right, Tice, everything would be
right. And that's what's so cool is we can add, as we're doing it, we do it, right? We click the buttons.
There you go. There you go.
So a really great way to change these things around and get it. So to me, these options and the abilities to change these things, while this part is different, actually, this is very similar to Race Studio 2. The differences make this more powerful and more user-friendly and more configurable to what you need out of it. The last one I really wanted to look at, and we're going to jump into our scatter plot. So we see these big scatter plots. And to make things easier, to not get into all the details of how we do it, I'm going to hide this so we get down to one big measure. And we see this is colored. I love the color.
Maybe you only turn on 1 lap, so it's even easier to see.
Use my laps button. Oh, all laps.
Yeah. Or the other way.
Right.
But quick and easy.
Right. So another one Roger and I talked about, he likes to look at this with the lines.
Yeah.
So we can turn off the dots and make it all lines, right? Or we can make the lines thicker. So the power to change this, and what I suggest to people is when you're doing this, click around, go in here and see what setting do I really like. Maybe you like them really thick. That to me looks better than the thin line, but everybody's different. And obviously, if you don't like the thick line, there's a lot of people are just wrong.
and
So,
as while you're thinking about how you're going to finish this, the other thing that's different between Ray Studio 2 and Ray Studio 3 as far as XY plots is we've added this radiused curved lines, which make
yeah,
understanding where 2G is all the way from it's a portion at 14. So 2G's all the way from the braking and all the way up to the max corner. So
right.
I like those addition of those lines instead of just guessing where that curve should be.
Right. And another option, we're getting into kind of how to look at things a little bit, but I like to turn these on like not at the highest rate, 9 dots. And then when you go to your best 5 laps, it really gives you a cool heat image. And it's a great way to look at it. This is one of the times I think the dark background really helps. Right now, this is a pretty powerful graph for somebody to look at.
And you've colorized them by what in this particular case?
So that brings us to our next point. This paint can up here. When you click the paint can, it gives you your option of what you want to look for. So we can color this by, say, speed. Type in speed. We can pick our channel. We can let it auto scale or we can custom scale. Say, okay, now we're colored by speed.
By speed.
We can click it again, and now it goes to by lap. And if we want to pick this channel again, say we want to do, I have a lot of favorites. We want GPS radius, so how sharp this corner was in our data, we can pull that up too.
Yep.
Scale is a little bit funny because the scale of the radius is something, we talked about this in some of the other sessions, how you can go in here and change this around to
tweak
to
that
hone in on the parts you want.
But the cool part is that is I call it 3-dimensional, 3D imaging.
Yeah.
And I like throttle position, and so it's telling you where the dots are placed by. In this case, it's a friction circle, so it's longitudinal G and lateral G. And then what are you doing? What else is affecting that? And it could be throttle, it could be brake pressure. Is another one that is would be very good for this. Where are you on your brakes? Red being the highest brake pressure, all the way up to blue being 0 brake pressure, and see how much you're trail braking and right. using the car.
And then Neil asked a really great question, which brings me to the last point I really wanted to hit in this webinar was right clicks. Your right click function lets you change the things around. It lets you add windows, remove windows, and choose them. It also gives you the settings. And when we hop into our settings, it gives it to us for the scatter plot.
Because that's where you right clicked.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, because we right clicked in a scatter plot, it gives us scatter plot settings. If we right click in the map, we get map settings and the storyboard and time distance. We have another way to change our line thickness. I think the buttons are much, much quicker. We can pick how big our cursor point is, our labels, and then Neil's question, the circular grid. So we can turn that on. We cover this in the profiles one, the ability to put different channels in different panels and different windows. And maybe that's something I just noticed is sometimes we call them windows, sometimes we call them panels.
Same thing.
They're used interchangeable here. Yeah. And that's one, as the names have changed from some of the previous sessions, that these things change a little bit. We can also choose what we hide in the windows. So now we can't quite see them. And this is one, rather than go through all our colors, we'll go back to light mode and you can see here's with them on. We right click, choose our settings. We can turn them off. Oh, I don't know what button I clicked. Ah, hey, we found a bug.
Things we learn, right?
Right.
But to answer Neil's question a little bit real quick, those curves, that right click and going in there and turning those on, by default they're on. So yes. So if you don't like them, you'd want to turn it off. But I find that it fits. It's an XY plot. The curved lines is usable by me and virtually everyone. So.
Yeah, I really like having that scaling there because it gives me some kind of quantitative part to everything else.
I agree.
Those are the big things I really wanted to hit, but I see we do have a bunch of questions. There's one that's been up for a little bit is, can you download the Google Earth KML files for the track locations if we're not online? So no, when you look at your map, and let's go here, to get this background, we need the internet when we're doing it. We can't download those right now. I don't know if that's a technical thing or exactly how that part works.
There is some discussion that will clip out that background image from the latest Google piece,
Yep.
and it'll be part of the track map database when you load it, right? So it would show up here, but it would work without the web. But don't look that that's going to happen in the next version
Yep.
or two. But I think that there is some thought of that for the future.
Right. If you don't have internet, this is the image you'll see.
There you go.
Neat option. Here again, we can go in, pick our lines, right, and change those out how you want them.
The one that I would like you to do, since we chatted about it, John asked the question, how do you change the order of channels? You have to go to the time distance plot, and then you have the option of changing the order of channels. Matt just clicked on that. It should open up a little dialog box.
Yep. And then
there it is. And then custom sort.
So you can do your custom sort. This is one, again, different people like it in different ways. I used to be a little more rigid in how I liked everything
Me too.
sorted. And this we can drag and drop them where we want them. For me now, with the ability to have the search bar, I just search. So when I go in here and I've got a million channels. Me
too. It used to be something that would be very, very touchy to me. I always wanted them in a certain order because I was used to it, right? And that was speed. But now with the search box, it's there. And the other one that we hardly ever do, if you just jump back to that, to the configuration side, you can sort by channel types, which is something that a lot of people don't know about or don't use either. So. So if you're
Benjamin asked a great question about some special applications and stuff, shoot Roger and I an email. We have used it in all different ways.
Yeah.
One of the sessions you see over here, Camelot Ring, is my neighborhood. My son uses one on his a Solo 2 on his bike. AIM users around the world have done all kinds of different things. So shoot us an email, let us know what you're after, and we can see what we can come up with. There's a lot of really neat uses. Emails will be in the last slide here, so you'll see them.
Yep. We'll get you there in a second. We'll get you there in a second.
Kyle, colors conditional instead of just a value. Can you show where you're over 1.1 G? Absolutely. So that's where you're probably going to hop into a math channel and say if your G's are over 1 G, make it on, and then you can plot that in your in a graph or in the map, and it'll be 2 values and 2 colors. So it'll be just like a coasting channel. Same idea in those documents we share with coasting, and some of those math channels are built in here already.
Walter has a great question for you to end it up with, since we've been talking about the difference between Ray Studio 2 and Ray Studio 3. Any chance to get the data from my older generation, let's just say, it could be Evo 4, he's talking about MXL, could be original Solo, into Ray Studio 3 beta for analysis?
Absolutely. So when we look at our whole session in the database view, we want to import an item into our database. We click our gear, and then we can say import and choose the folder or the file that it's from, work through the Windows options and put our data in.
There's a browse button shows up, and you have the option of doing the DRK file, which is the older stuff, or the XRK, which is the current stuff. So you will get it in. It won't be quite as smart, because the older DRKs and GPKs and RRK files don't have some of the intelligence of the newer stuff. Certainly linking videos and data together will not work, but certainly, absolutely, you can bring the data in.
Right. So as you start to want to use it, that can be any AIM data. It could be data you downloaded from one of the webinars, and there's been a ton shared. It can be your data, a friend's data, however you get it. This is where you go, is to this gear and import. And you can do a file, you can do a folder, you can do SmartyCam HD movies. They all come in and have data with them.
And
So a lot
racing
of great
sim,
ways to pull
racing
this
sim,
in. Yeah, sim data.
racing sim.
Taisu's on with us. He's doing it with all his sim data. The last session we had James and Ray and Emiliano grabbing all their sim data. So hopefully this kind of showed you some of the ways to get around everything. I know while some of it's the same, some of it's a little bit different, but I think we kind of laid out what a lot of these buttons do. It was a lot in a short time. So that's where jump back to that presentation and you'll see the buttons in order of kind of how to pull everything up.
Absolutely. It's always amazing to me that you, not you, but us, we think, okay, we got an hour to fill this time in, and in a fairly straightforward topic like this, you think you could knock out, what the icons are and some right click functionality and some new things.
Right.
And we could go on for another hour and continue to show things, but we do not have that time today. So
Right.
perfect. Perfect, Matt. I appreciate it. There was a lot of information there that you shared that is important. I just want to reiterate for those of you that are watching this. Yeah, we covered some stuff. Watch the video back, do some things. The presentation materials, which I will reshare my screen here in just a second and show that to you. Let me do that now. Share screen.
I'm going to give it back to you, Roger.
Perfect. And it should pop up there. There it is. I needed to do one last step. If I'm just going to go back a couple of clicks there, like I said, there's 40 or 45 slides. And we just talk about those settings thing that Matt mentioned. A lot of what he said is in here. To go back and just take a look at the presentation, download the PDF that Robbie's linked earlier, or if you're watching this later on YouTube, there's a link to the presentation material in the description box below. He goes through and gives you just a quick little piece about a lot of the stuff that he talked about today and shows where it's at and what it does. And maybe that's just the added little piece that you might want to. I had a question about that. Go take a look in the presentation. Like I said, there's 40 some functions that Matt covered there, where we only probably covered 15 or so today in the presentation itself. So appreciate that, Matt. Like all of our webinars, this one included, we will be taking this within an hour or so and putting it up on YouTube. We're up to about 191 videos that are up there, including all of the webinars from this webinar series, plus a bunch more. Go visit us there, take a look at it. It's one of those things you can jump in and you think you're going to look at a video and pretty soon you've watched 8 or 10 of them, right? So the normal YouTube stuff, take a look at it. Go check it out at AIM Data. If you just go to YouTube and type in AIM Data and search for that, you'll find our page. So if you need to get a hold of us for anything as the racing season is starting to really ramp up, give us a call at the 800 number. Look for us at racetracks all across the country. We're out there doing our best to give you the customer support at the track, and of course always there ready to answer your call or your emails. Just give us a holler. This one is what we're going to do next week. Is we're going to talk a little bit more about motorcycle stuff. We've had Chloe's been joining us a lot for some real technical stuff and writing and her experiences. She's going to continue to do that. She's been just so well received by everybody here and love what she does. But we've also had Mark Jung has come in, and he's worked with us in the past, and he's going to come in and chat about just some practical data analysis for track day motorcycle riders. Mark runs the school, the motorcycle riding school at Mid Ohio, and 57 rider development is another thing that he does. And Mark's going to come in and just chat about, boy, there's this. We've got just a lot of track day riders come to his schools, come to him as a looking for information. And there's just these basic things that track day riders want to learn about data. And I wanted to bring him in and just talk about a lot of them are solo based, but there's a lot of other data loggers out there as well. Let's just chat about that with Mark and from his experience of working with probably 25, 30 people a week or per week, different people riding bikes on a track day scenario. So we're going to chat with Mark about that next week, and we'll really enjoy that. So back to kind of summing this one up a little bit. Matt just did a great job of going through the Race Studio 2 differences to Race Studio 3, some of the ones that you should feel comfortable with, and some of the ones that are new, and kind of went over some of those. Tons of information in the presentation. I think it was very valuable. We do a lot of these on Race Studio 3, but more from the programming side with Emiliano here. But this one was more on a hands-on, with Matt, who's been testing and doing just a ton of work with this. So appreciate that very much, Matt. There's Matt's Matt's information, contact information down there below. His website is trailbreak.com, matt@trailbreak.com, and appreciate it very much, Matt. There's my information. If there's some questions that we didn't get to, and I know there were a few that we couldn't probably slide into this one. We're running a little bit late already, but drop me a note, Roger at Aim Sports, and we'll get those going for you as well. So I appreciate all of you coming. Matt, is there anything you'd kind of like to add as we kind of close this one up?
No, thanks for having me. This was really fun. I hope everybody took something away and that they download the presentation. It helps them out as they're going through, and reach out to Roger and I if you have trouble or if there's anything that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, this idea of putting together a document like this with these word by word is something that I did a lot with our seminars in the past, and it's really helpful for people to have that backup reference material, which I think that's what exactly this is. So thank you very much, Matt. Thanks everybody. We'll see you next week. If you want to join us, I have another, drop me an email note. I'm going to be doing a webinar this evening, 6 o'clock Central, another webinar, and we're going to talk about snowmobile racing. It's outside of our normal webinars, but if you have any interest in just watching a little bit about the basic data analysis in snowmobiles, it's mostly Race Studio 2 focused, but for what they're doing. But drop me a note. I'll send you the link to register for that one this evening. So thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it. And we will see you all next week. Talk to you soon.